Okay, welcome back. This video is going to be about layout. I'm not going to play any music. I'm just going to talk about the fundamentals in terms of the timing and the grid. So with layout, the grid's your most important thing. We're in the arrangement view, not the timing down the bottom. The reason I say pay attention to the grid is because each tune runs at a different tempo. I know I mentioned when we were making the tech house drums that around sort of 15 seconds something tends to happen. That was just a rough guideline, because if I change the tempo from 126, if you watch the bottom bar down here, that moves. So it depends if you're playing the tune faster or slower. So just completely ignore the seconds. It's all about the bars on the grid. Now, to get your grid view correct, or to make it easy, if you right click on here, and you'll see you've got an adaptive grid, you've got a fixed grid. Ignore the fixed grid. I don't find any use for it. I normally have mine on narrow, and it's adaptive. So what that means is when I zoom in, if you concentrate on these lines here, so you've got I zoom in, watch, you'll see they open up, and you'll see smaller lines and smaller lines and smaller lines. You keep going, smaller lines. And what they are is, if you take, for example, I've done 8 bars, 4 bars, 2 bars, 1 bar, half a bar, and then something that's wrong, just to give you an example. If you take 1 bar, if I expand this out and I scroll down, you'll see that here, 1, 2, 3, 4, the 2, this section here from the 8 to the 2 is a quarter of a bar. If I continue to scroll in, that's an 1/8 of a bar. I keep going, you'll start to see 16ths, and these grids keep getting smaller. So you can count, if you don't know, you can count each grid. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So you know there, these are 16th notes. If you continue scrolling further, you'll go to 32s. When you are looking at bars in house music, you're working over a 4/4 drum pattern, which is up here, 4/4. I'm not a drummer, so I don't understand. You've got like 3/4, 5/. We've got all these different combinations, right? In general, when you're dealing with electronic music, most of it's made with a 4/4 pattern, so you don't need to concern yourself with that. So for the purpose of this, I have created an 8-bar loop, 4-bar loop, 2-bar loop, just to show you how to lay out a track once you've started making an idea. Now, when it comes to track layout, there are no real right answers to how long your song should be, how the layout should work. There are some key fundamental things, which are the timing and how you translate that timing throughout the track. But if you wanted, to start with a break and then within 30 seconds or 16 bars drop the bass in, you can. It depends. You might make a 3-minute tune, you might make a 6-minute tune, you might make an 8-minute tune. Depends on the purpose that tune's for. So I'll sometimes make a 6-minute, 5.5-minute house track, which has got 2 breakdowns in there, and make it DJ friendly. So I'll have like a solid sort of 32-bar warm-up. So when the person's mixing it in and they're listening in the headphones, and then I'll drop the bass. Sometimes I'll make a tune which is 3.5 minutes long. You'll notice if you look on Beatport nowadays, there's a lot of artists that are making tunes which are way shorter than they classically have been for house music. And I believe this is a Spotify reason. I think Spotify has like some sort of optimized time, if I'm correct, and also radio as well. So if you want to submit your tune to like BBC Introducing and stuff, if you're submitting a 16-minute track, the likelihood of them playing that is quite slim. Whereas if you submit a 3-minute track, they're probably going to give you that 3 minutes of airtime. So just something to consider when you are making a tune. You'll notice that Some artists will have the extended mix and they'll have the radio edit, and that's the reason why. So just to go on to timing a little bit, if you've watched the other videos, you'll see that I tend to make things in an 8-bar loop, and then I will add as much fatness to that track. So I'll get to the sort of the key point of the track where all the elements are, and then I'll lay it out and subtract things and add things as we go along. And when we're talking about bars, this loop grid at the top here, it's a good idea to set that to 8. And I don't mean here, that's not 8. Even though it's on the 8, that's 7. So you're looking at the end of the bar. So 8 bars is actually on the 9. You can then take this whole thing and move it across. So 16 bars ends on the 17. So it will be on the 17. Obviously, that's a 16-bar loop. You can drag that across. You'll see from the 17 to the 33. Now, with house music again, you might say, well, the bass drops on a minute. It's not quite a minute, look. If I move this, it's a minute now, but that's 128. So ignore the actual minutes. Don't listen to a tune and sit there with your stopwatch. Be like, well, this dropped at like 16.5 seconds and try and match it. You stick with your grid. If you stick with your grid, you'll be absolutely fine. It'll be in time. So we're going to cover a couple of different ways to lay out a tune. We'll start. Actually, first and foremost, let's talk about the size. So everything works in like 2, 4, 6, 8, 16, like multiples of 8, really. And I've demonstrated here how a 4-bar fits into an 8-bar, how 2 bars fits into a 4-bar and into an 8-bar, how 1 bar will fit in, how half a bar will fit into that. And I've got an example here. If I double click this and we look at the grid on the top again, so 1, 2, 3, 4, onto the second bar, I've kind of got like 2.1, like a 2.1 bar. So if you made a loop which is that size, it's fine in some essence. If you're making, if you really want something like that to happen. However, it's going to blag your head when you come to trying to fit it in the track, and I'll show you why. So if I was to take this full loop and duplicate it all the way across to the end of this 8 bars, watch what happens. So press Control D. It doesn't fit. So it doesn't fit nicely there. Now, if you were to just go, okay, I'll drag that on, you've cut half of your loop out or whatever you made, half of your MIDI pattern. Now, if we scroll in here, you'll see these dark markers. So if I look at the 3 here, the end of the second bar, you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 blocks until the start of the next one. If I go to the 4th one, you're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4. If I go to the 5th one, you're looking at 2. It takes you to the end of the 5th bar before it restarts again. So that would be the loop. It's completely out and it's not going to fit. So be mindful to always create your sounds in 4, 2, half a bar, multiples of like, you see 2 times table really. That's how it works. Not so much 6. You're not going to create 6. It needs to fall within that 8 multiple as well. So we'll delete that. Hopefully that makes sense. And we'll start looking at the standard layout. So if I reiterate again, when I make an 8-bar loop, you don't want an 8-bar loop just being the same all the way across without there being any transitions between each segment section. There is a word for it. I'm not sure what the word is. Typically, what I'll do is when I get to the end of an 8-bar, like I said, I might cut the kick out a little bit. I might add a little bit of a drum roll there, just so there's a smooth transition into the next segment. Once you've got your 8-bar loop full of stuff, you can then start duplicating across this grid and figure out where you want your stuff to be. So if, let's say, for example, this was let's quickly name it. Let's say that was bass. This was all the drums. This was the synth and some other percussion, etc. Just use your imagination. If I highlight this and press Control D, Control D, Control D, this would be for a typical house track. Your first 32 bars will be the introduction. You'll notice on some house tunes that it will be a 30 seconds, ignore the seconds, it'll be a 16 bar introduction and then the bass might drop in. So if you wanted to do that, if I had another MIDI channel, let's pretend this is the bass. Let's insert MIDI track. Let's pull this down. That's fine. You could have your drum beat rolling, gets to the end of the 16, your bass kicks in, you get to here, and then you want, say, 30 seconds of bass or 16 bars of bass, and then you want a break. You can do that if you want. Some house tracks do that. Others, or the most common way, what I've found anyway, is you'll have a 32 bar introduction. Then you'll have a drop. So if I can name that here, so if I had a locator, I'll just put Control R, I have a drop. And what I mean by a drop is that's where the full beat kicks in. Now, typically, you don't have all of the elements on the first drop. You'll notice when you're mixing that, you'll be listening to the drum beat. You'll know that something's about to come in because maybe the kick cuts out. You might have a riser that comes up here or some vocal. Something happens at this point, and it gives you an indicator as to something's about to happen and change. So the bass might kick in. So if we put that bass back in, we'll put the bass back in over 8 bars. Just to insert a new track. And then what you'll do is you'll get this, again, Command D. So you see the change there. So you've worked over 32 bars, and then what's happened is it's dropped in, and the tune now starts rolling. At this point, it's up to you where you want to go. You can have this rolling for a minute if you want, or 32 bars, should I say. So you can have it like this. So you got your bass line the same length as this, or the start of your drop, and then move into a break. Or you could tease it a little bit and have a 16 bar drop, and then you start moving into your first breakdown. So if I add a locator there, rename breakdown 1. Breakdown 1 we'll cover breakdowns and we'll cover all of that sort of stuff in another video. Let's say, for example, breakdown was you're getting rid of the drums. There's less elements in there, and you add in, let's say, a vocal here over this section. You've got like a drum roll that's coming in here. If I highlight all this the same color, let's do it brown. At the end of your breakdown, you're going to go back into a drop again. So you're not going to do the same drop at the same size and then do another break. Typically on the house track, you'll have the drop, it'll go into a small break. You'll have a longer drop, it'll go into a longer break. You'll have a longer drop, then an outro. If I put a marker here actually and say, you know, this is the intro. So intro, 32 bars. It could be 16 bars. As long as it's a multiple of 8, it doesn't matter. Drop, 16 bars. Breakdown. You should know what a breakdown is. It's when elements are reduced. The beat tends to stop playing, or there's a filter on it, or you know, you low pass the bass, introduce something new. There's a build up of anticipation, and then it drops again. So what you can do then is copy your first drop, drag it across, stick it here. So this will be drop 2. There's nothing on there, as I said. Drop 2. Now on drop 2, you might want to bring a new element in. So it's not the same. So let's just put another element in there. That could be whatever you want. Use your imagination. This tends to be a bit longer. So, and this is how you can develop your track. So you've added a new element in. If you're doing it the way I do it, you're taking elements away because I try and get as much as possible as I can. I never fill a tune with that first 8-bar loop where I'm messing around and jamming. I'll always start laying it out, and when you lay it out, you'll find inspiration for taking stuff away even more or adding more stuff. So we can do this. You might want to then, as long as you're working in, so over a 16-bar shot, you might want to add something else in here, which complements the second drop. Let's just do that. Let's add something here. And the reason you might do that is this sound might start to lead into the second break. To be honest, you could start it there. You could have something building up slowly, like a vocal kind of auto filtered from the real low end and then just creeping up. And you've got a transition. You might pull elements out, play around with it for how it sounds for you. We'll cover breaks in a separate video anyway. You know, this is just about to come into the second break. You could add something there if you want to. Anywhere in these sections, you can add something new or take something away. Let's say you may take that away there. You see there's a little transition. You don't have to have that. If that was the kick drum, you could have it rolling all the way through. But you're always thinking in terms of segments. Second drop, if we just take the first, second drop, second breakdown, if you take the first breakdown, for example, we'll drag it over. Let me zoom out so you can see. This, on a lot of house tracks, will be the main breakdown. Some will keep it 30 seconds, 16 bars. Some will go for 32 bars. So it's basically the same size of this section where you're jamming. There'll be a big anticipation, a massive snare roll, a big build up, you know, however you want that to look, depending on what elements you put in there. So we just put breakdown 2. Cool. Easy peasy. Drag your second drop if you want to. Drag it across. Stick it at the end of there. Notice in time. This will be your final drop. Now, on some tracks, there was a really cool Inland Nights tune. What was it called? Long Time. Have a listen to that. It's a fucking sick tune, but it goes for ages, right? And then it's after the second drop at the end where the vocal kicks in, and the vocal is like the main part of the tune, and you only get it for a little bit, so you have to listen to the whole tune. So here you might want to put something else in, so it's not the same. So you feel like the track's developing. You don't want this drop to be the exact same as this one. It can be. I mean, I've done it. It doesn't really matter, but if you want to add stuff in, do it in the right places. So you might want to add. Let's add another track. MIDI. Let's say you're going to put a vocal there. From here, which is drop 3, sorry. You just add a locator, rename, drop 3. This is where it starts to tail off. So what you can do here is that's going to play for 1 minute, but approximately at 126, 32 bars. You can take your first drop, which had less elements in it than this one and this one, drag it across, stick it there. The tune will still be playing, but the person listening will notice that it's starting to simmer down because less elements are in there. And then, simple as fuck, you can take your intro, drag that across and put it here. Now you may want to reverse your intro, because if you start with the lowest amount here and you're building up, and let's say you've got something here which is totally fine, what you don't want to do is duplicate all that first intro section and include this bit on the end there, because you're building out, you're not building up. So you just basically reverse it. So if I just go back again, and let's say that was there, insert MIDI, you could, in effect, take the last section of the intro, stick that there, and then take the first section of the intro and stick that there. Bear in mind, normally the transition bit here, which will be a build up, you might have rises and stuff like that. You don't want that in the middle here. So any sort of tinsel that you've got or anticipation you're building, just move it over. Now, if you look at that layout in this format, what's that? You're looking at 6.5 minute tune at 126. That's more than enough. Look, genuinely, it's more than enough. Another way to lay the tune out, you don't even have to have that, to be honest. You can reduce that down. Let's just see. Six minutes. I mean, like I said, I typically make between this sort of length for a house track. And that's because sometimes I won't have a full 1 minute breakdown. It gets a bit tedious sometimes, but they are sick because you notice on a lot of dance floors, when you've got a really sick breakdown and it builds up over that long period of time, when the anticipation hits and the drop drops, it fucking drops. If you just wanted a 16 bar break twice, you drag this back over, you'll see it's 5.5 minutes. Again, that's a long track. It's decent. The reason why you're working in these blocks is because you want it to be DJ friendly. If at any point, let's say you took, if I just go back here, you took a vocal. So let's say you was inserting a vocal in here, but the vocal was actually this long. So you've got this extra little bit on the end. I'm just going to change it. It didn't work, but let's say that the vocal was this long. You can, if you can't fit the vocal in and you really want it to be that long. I mean, I've done this recently on a track. So my mate sent me a vocal. I've stuck it in. I needed to get the whole thing in, and I've had to fuck the timing up to make the tune work. And what I mean by that then is I've had to take all of the drop after the break and move it there, which for DJing, unless the DJ knows that, if the DJ starts trying to mix the tune in here to the next one and he tries to roll through here, he's going to get to this bit and the whole thing's going to be off. So wounds to you. Most people, when they're mixing, they start the next track after the second drop. Some will do it in between. I fuck about between the two, to be honest. But if you know somebody's going to start mixing there and they know because they've listened to the tune, cool. But technically, it's throwing the timing out. And the issue with that then is when you start trying to add something else in, let's say you, let me just do this. You have to zoom in to find out where it is. Whereas you see how it doesn't match this grid anymore when you zoomed out. Whereas this matches the grid, that doesn't quite match the grid. So you just make your life a little bit harder for yourself. Okay, let's look at a different layout. Let's look at a layout for a sort of shorter tune. Let's say you're going to make a 4 minute. Just delete these markers. Let's come back over here. Let's say you're going to make a 3.5, 3 minute track. You're not going to have a 1 minute build up. That's factual. So let's just go straight back to what we had before, which was an 8 bar loop, a 16 bar loop of your elements. Let's loop that. So you might decide, well, okay, it's going to be a 16 bar of an introduction. We're then going to come and then we're going to go into the main drop straight away. So this might be drop 1. Just delete this one. So this might be your drop here. So your bass kicks in, this will be your bass. Insert MIDI track. And the tune's rolling along. You then might decide, okay, we're going from that into a breakdown. You've then got a 16 bar breakdown. You then decide, okay, we're going to go for a drop again, which you would. Obviously, you know, keep breaking and breaking, so you're going to another drop. Let's just make this look like a breakdown. Let's just change the color of it brown again so you can see. Maybe take that out. Zoom out. You've then got your second drop. Like I mentioned before, you might want to put another element in on your second drop. So drop 2. You add an extra element in there, vocal or something. Now you're not typically going to go rolling into another breakdown. You could have like a mini one if you want. You could take sort of like a little 8-bar segment there and then go back into a drop again like this. That's fine. You could, if you really want to, keep this drop going for 32 bars and build the elements up. So you're gonna put something else in here, and then you're gonna put something else in here. Let's just close this down so you can see better. And then you start going to your outro again. So you could, like I said before, reverse your intro, your outro. You can highlight, press and hold control on your keyboard, click, keep it clicked and held, drag it over, and then make sure you release the mouse click before you release the control, and that'll copy it over. Let's look at this track for an example. 3 minutes. That's fine. If you was going to put another little break in there that we just took out, and then drop again. So you could, if you want, take this section. So you've got 16, you've got 64 bars here. You can take this last section, move that there, insert a break here, and then you've made the tune slightly longer with a final little drop before it starts to fade out. So this little drop though might not have all the elements. It might be like just like that. And then you're looking at 3 minutes 15. You could, if you really want, stick a full drop in. There's no real rules on how you do it. This is what I'm trying to say to you. As long as you've got the grid right and everything's timed within the grid right. So when you change the tempo, everything fits. So it's really down to the motivation of how you want to make your track sound. Some people, they'll make a tune and you'll notice that the bass line doesn't kick in until sort of 1 minute 30 if you're dealing with house tracks. So what happened there, for example, is if I remove these, delete these markers, not to confuse anybody. Let's just try a different style. I'm just going to move this over a second. So you could have a 16-bar intro. They then have it drop after 30 seconds. So you got to mix it in quite quickly. They might have it drop with the bass line popping in. That's what I mean by drop. Your bass is kicking in, the tune's really rolling. You then get to here, which is 32. Normally, if most tunes drop there, this one's dropping there. They might break it here. So they might make that a break on the actual minute, which can be quite nice when you're mixing. You know, if you start your when you're mixing, if you start your new tune as the drop of the tune you're playing kicks in after the second break, on most house music, when it comes to about 1 minute, or should I say 32 bars, you can switch the bass and there's just a seamless transition. That's when you'll have like you'll still hear both tracks playing, but the new bass will be underneath, and you can get some real sick mixes when you do that. Or if you're trying to get rid of your tune and pull it out, let's say you push the filter on the mixer and you low pass filter it up, and as it's going to drop on a minute, because when you look at these transitions here, each tune's got these transitions and they've got this anticipation. So the anticipation within the tune you're already playing will build around here, and you're about to swap the tunes over. Let's say you want to pull it out, you could pull it out straight into a break, and then that'll just sound seamless. The tune's changed, but it's just dropped straight into a break. So some people will make the first breakdown drop on 1 minute, and then they won't do a minute's, they might only do it for 16 bars, and then the bass kicks back in again. So just listen to your music, you'll think, okay, that bass line doesn't kick in till circa a minute and a half. Again, the timing's irrelevant. It depends on the tempo. If I just try and familiarize yourself with it. So we'll just go there. So you can do that. You can roll this for longer if you want. Duplicate it, Command D, and then take your bass, your break again. See, none of this is wrong, just Command D. We've got what we've got here. It's a 32 bar break. Take this again, drag this across. You can keep fucking going. You can make a 45-minute tune if you want. Add another break, duplicate that fucking break, drag this again, stick it there, add takeaway elements. You can just keep going. I mean, what you're on like 5 minutes out there. You haven't got an outro. So as long as you're segmenting them into the right amount of bars, don't stress too much about the break has to be here, the drop has to be here. That's down to your creativity and your creative flair and the purposes for the reason why you're making a tune. So hopefully that's explained a bit. Any questions, just give me a shout. Nice one.